we have Mr. Ramkumar Narinesingh with us, and we're going to get the discussion. By now, you all should know his face and be familiar with him. And he's here on a Thursday. We have 30 minutes this morning. We are now 14 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock. And we're going to get into discussion about disciplinary action. So for all of you who headed out to work this morning and you're watching this online or whatever, disciplinary action. Remember, your actions have consequences in the workplace.
Morning,
What's up? Morning to you, man. So, where you want to start with disciplinary action?
Well, disciplinary action in Trinidad and Tobago has been contentious for a number of years.
Right.
I think as far back as since, from going back all the way to when we moved into an independence and became a republic, and the Industrial Relations Act, or even actually before the Industrial Relations Act, prior to that, when I think there was the ordinance, you had contention arising in the workplace when it comes to the employer-employee relationship. And employers, they have always been, unfortunately, when you look at the history of the employee-employer relationship, the reality is that employers have a track record of abusing the employees' rights in history.
Okay.
When it comes to disciplinary action. And if you go back, all the way back to when, society was severely segregated by class and caste, and I use the word severely there. You had people being beaten, people being physically abused, mentally abused. And that's where all of this, comes from. It's written in blood, so to speak.
Right.
And over time, the world embraced what we simplify as the principles of natural justice, what the industrial court has simplified and judicial system has simplified as the principles of natural justice. Principles of natural justice establish a minimum standard by which a person is supposed to be treated and engaged with in the course of any form of accusation being made against them. Now, in today's work environment, Stefan, what's really happening is that people seem to not have an appreciation for a separation between circumstances where people may have made a poor decision in a work environment and where people may have taken deliberate action or may have acted deliberately, I should say, in regards to whatever the issue and circumstances is. And we have a tendency, Stefan, to negatively interpret everything. So,
you think? Go ahead,
yeah. I mean, we look at things that are happening and immediately the human behavior is to assume the worst.
Right.
So, and I know we talked about late coming recently, and if Trinidad and Tobago, if you recall, I mentioned that you could have people with different circumstances coming to work late, and if you take, as the work environment, if you take a broad brush and you just pass it on everybody, you would label everybody as being deliberately intending to violate the employment terms.
Right.
But you could have different circumstances.
Right.
So, in the first instance, it is my professional opinion that disciplinary action should start off with an intention from the employer to be reformative. And that means that in the process and course of addressing whatever the issue is or whatever the concern is, it should be with an intention to help the employee come back to where they started or where they were meant to be when it comes to their duties and responsibilities.
All right.
So let's just consider, Stefan, circumstances where somebody, let's just take a simple job, cashing.
Okay.
Now I use cashing deliberately because quite often people who are engaged in this position, you hear that there are issues associated with cash shortage, errors when it comes to change, accountability for money. And it becomes one of the most contentious issues that could arise in a workplace, because the employer sees that different to how you may see somebody who, may have damaged something in the workplace. We treated cash a certain way in this country.
Yes.
You remember when they changed over the money and how everything, cash affects us a certain way. So, a cashier, you may have situations where a cashier may make a mistake, or there may be an issue surrounding money being accounted for. The drawer comes short. And the immediate reaction most people have is, that person may have stolen the money.
Yes, because that's the person that is responsible
accounted for the cash, the money missing, stolen the money. And also the kind of knee-jerk reaction now is, well, I can't have somebody who has an intention to steal working handling cash.
Correct.
I want to get the person out of the workplace. I want to send them home. I can't let them work another day, another minute, another second. And that type of behavior is what gets employers into trouble. 99% of the time they get into trouble. Because you didn't take a second or some type of time to say, well, you know what, let me just actually find out what actually happened. And then most of the time the reaction from the employee is very defensive.
Okay.
So instead of an employee sitting down and reasonably thinking, all right, let me see what happened on this shift that may have contributed to money being misplaced.
Right.
The employee is going to say, I don't know nothing about that. And it creates immediate contention, because the employer is thinking, I gave you the responsibility for my cash register. I expect you to be accountable for the money that's being handled.
Right.
How could you not know anything about the money that's missing?
Well, you could not know.
Oh no, I don't disagree with you.
Right.
You could not know, but it's the attitude and the reaction to it.
Well, the first thing is, because nobody likes to be called a thief.
You see what you just did? Exactly my point. Because even if somebody does not tell you that you're a thief, and I say to you, you get the impression, and that's the problem that we have there, Stefan. We have a lot of assumptions.
Right. No, so nobody likes to be called a thief or a liar.
Yeah.
So the first thing somebody will say, so you're telling me I lying then?
Right. And on the other side, nobody likes if their property is missing and the person who they think is responsible for it is claiming they don't know nothing about it.
They don't know nothing about it, yeah. How are you going to know nothing about it?
Right? So reasonability, the advice that I have this morning is, this is where you start. You start with a minimum standard of reasonability, and that standard is to do not presume immediately the worst. Now that's easier said than done, right? Because the other problem you might have is that the person may have had a track record of money coming short.
Okay.
That happens, right?
Right, yeah.
But here's the catch now. 99% of the employers who are faced with these situations fail to effectively address the little issues. And as they pile up in the employer's mind, it's becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger issue. But in the employee's mind, that happened, we forget about that and we move on. What I just described there is the actual, if you were to see that in an illustration, you would see a pile on this side and nothing on this side. And then the employer's thinking, how could you not know that this has been going on? And the employee's thinking, that was past. What do I have to do it now? And this is where, in this regard now, this is where the issue of documentation and the issue of accountability for that documentation comes into question. Because most employers are of the mindset that, why should I have to remind you about the responsibility and duties that you were hired to do?
Right.
why should I have to proverbially babysit you into doing and being attentive,
But
doing the
what's the
correct
point in
thing?
paying your salary if I don't do that?
Right.
Because it come like a micromanaging situation now.
That's right. That's a word that people throw. That's a term that people throw around a lot as well. They say,
Micromanaging.
yeah, why should I have to micromanage you into doing the right thing? Well, this is the unfortunate reality of how the scales balance when it comes to the work environment. Remember the episode we had, Trinidad and Tobago, if you all remember, when I spoke about the employee contributes 10% and the employer contributes 90%.
90%, yeah.
Well, I gave a whole explanation on that, and we do have the that episode on YouTube, so you can go back and look at it if you missed it. But I gave up what I would consider to be a practical explanation of why, and this ties into it now. The employer is in control of all the assets and facilities of a work environment.
Okay.
The employee is only in control of what they are given control of and the rate and standard and process of them acting in the execution of their duties and responsibilities. Those two things they control.
Right.
Right? So using you as an example, you have a duty and a responsibility to come here and be the host of the show. You're given parameters to operate within. But tomorrow morning, the employer could decide that they want to change where they set, how it's laid out. They could decide the standards that they want to introduce. They have control. They can decide what camera they want to use. They have control. Now, the only thing you genuinely have control over is how you deliver your service. That's the only thing.
Right.
So, the thing about it now is that when you leave this workplace, how much of this studio is they can carry home?
None.
I was just checking.
None.
You don't, right? And you don't carry home the ads. You don't carry home the duties. You don't carry home any of
I
these
don't carry
things,
home
right?
none of those things.
It stays right here. The circumstances of it stay right here.
Exactly.
Right. And then you come back expecting that the circumstances that you need for execution will remain here. Right?
Yes.
Right. So the point is that when you go home to your personal life, right, although you may have it in your mind, you don't bring any of it here as well. You don't bring your furniture here.
You don't bring your problems here either.
It's in your head.
Yeah.
It's in your head.
Right.
And that is actually quite relevant to what we're going to talk about. It's in your head, but you don't bring it here. But at the end of the day, whilst you may spend a certain amount of time here, your personal investment is actually outside of here, not here. So you ever hear people say, some people make work their personal life? And
Yes.
you notice, you see quite often, because there are a lot of high performers in this country have made work their personal life. So that's it. That's one of the compromise that you make. If you invest yourself a lot in a work environment, you're going to be very good at it, but it becomes your personal life.
It becomes,
right?
Yeah.
And then you have an imbalanced human being, because
of course.
Because work is so personal, they take everything very personal, and then so that's a whole different, that's a conversation for performance. We'll talk about it another day.
Right.
But coming back to the point, what happens in Trinidad and Tobago is this: because the employee goes to their personal life and to their personal circumstances, and the employer has all of these control, and the employee is contributing this 10%, what happens is you have to actually cater for, you must accommodate the possibility that your employee is not thinking about your business and your work environment in the same intimate, personalized, deep way that you take it, that you think about it.
Yeah, because the employee, all right, most employees, they are concerned with the bottom line.
Correct.
The bottom line is, when the month come, I get my
paid.
salary.
Correct.
Right. They're not concerned about the shortcomings during the month, They're not concerned about the day or the 2 or 3 days that they might have reached late in the month,
That's correct. They don't see the impact.
They're not studying that. They're not thinking about, okay, let's say it's a company that depends solely and wholly on contracts, right? In order to earn, right? You lose a contract. because you sent out a group of employees to do the work. They did it poorly.
Correct.
The client says, well, look, I can't continue this contract again, right?
Correct.
A lot of them just go about their business. They're waiting to get paid at the end of the month. And as far as they're concerned,
that's right.
Is at the end of the month they get a salary, and if the company is $50,000 less than what it was last month, that's not their concern.
So
should it have a marketing department, or it have a department to deal with that at the full level.
So should it be their concern?
Of course it should.
All right. So you say it should. So and
if the client is not happy with the service that we have given them, and we have performed poorly in delivering,
right.
Yes, it is our concern as well.
So I agree with you that they should be concerned, but does the law agree with you?
That's a good question. All right, because that one I can't say. I can't tell you what the law say. Yeah.
And this is the point. You and I and the entirety of Trinidad and Tobago could debate this from an ethical standpoint.
Right.
But from a legal standpoint, the reality is that the law does not establish the responsibility of that accountability on the employee. And let me tell you why I say that. The employee comes to the work environment. The employer that the employer is majority 90% in control of, or maybe 95% when it comes to when you look at what the employee can actually control and what they can change or affect, right? Because the employer has that high degree of investment and liability, it is reasonably expected, it's common sense, that the employer should now make the effort to always remind an employee. Well, when I say always, I want to be clear. This is not a babysitting situation, but establish evidence that the effort has been made to emphasize to the employee that circumstance of potential liability and detriment to the business that they depend on for their job security.
All right.
Right? In other words, you should not just assume that the employee is going to be mindful and thinking about that. You should not. So, and because as the employer, you carry the majority of control when it comes to the work environment, and you have the ability to impact on policies, procedures, protocols, and the accountability standard in a more meaningful way and a more direct way than the employee, that responsibility goes over to the employer.
Okay.
So a person who is making errors and the employer does not establish any type of record of having communicated to the employee the relevance and importance of not making those errors, right? What that you've given is that employee, you've given that employee the opportunity to argue that, since I work in here, I remember when you told me when I started working that, cashing is important. But I really forget, because every day I get involved in cashing and I'm not really paying attention to what happens after cashing. I am only paying attention to what happens in cashing.
You're right, yeah.
And a lot of employers feel very hurt by that. They feel very offended by that. In their minds, you're part of my workplace. How could you not be thinking about what happens after the cashing process is done? Or what happens before the cashing process is initiated? How? And they take it personal. But remember, employees in personal investment is not in your business. It is in their personal lives that they work to support.
Right.
Right? And that, what I just described there is, in my opinion, the single biggest reason why the employment relationship in the environment gets into contention when it comes to rights and responsibilities.
All right. I wanted to hold that thought there. We're 20 minutes in, so we got 10 more minutes to go. We're going to take a break. So when we come back from the break, we'll have 10 minutes. We'll open the phone lines, and any questions that you have for Mr. Narinesingh, we'll be willing to answer it as we continue the discussion here. And we want to open the phone line. We've been talking about disciplinary action. So the phone lines are open. It is 327-7400. That is 327-7400. And let's see what we have here. Yep. Hello, good morning. Hello?
Hello, morning.
Yeah, morning. Hey, Ricky, what going on?
Mr. Narinesingh, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Ricky.
Right. So when you reach to that stage and you keep warning and you keep addressing the employee about their actions, what is the next alternative to that? Is it that you go through the normal process where you normally give them the letter and then you move to remove them from the premises, or what is the next option to that?
All right.
Okay, so the plan was to do this. The plan was to do this topic in two parts, right? But so I'm gonna he's asked the question, so I'm gonna go straight into it. So where you have somebody, let's just say immediately somebody has done something, for example, like missing money, whatever, because you have to presume innocent until guilt. The first order of business is to do a formal notice to the employee informing them that you have an issue regarding an incident and you want to do an investigation.
Right.
Now, he also, I have to interpret his question to also mean that he's asking, if I keep warning somebody or I keep communicating somebody about their shortcomings, what happens next? But let's just be careful about how we use the word warning, because in industrial relations, warning connotates disciplinary action. So just to simply say that I have warned you and you didn't follow principles of natural justice, effective investigation, opportunity to participate in the investigation, formal notice of the outcome of the investigation process, and if you're moving to disciplinary action, formal notice of the allegations and reference to whatever evidence that you're going to be using to prove the allegations, as well as a formal notice within that for an actual disciplinary hearing, and within that notice of the right to representation, and then actually all those administrative things that I just laid out, that is even before the actual hearing.
Okay.
And it sounds complicated. I know some of you all are thinking, well, if I have a small business, why or how can the law expect me to go through all of this? The truth is, these things are standard documents, standard systems that we provide to companies. What we've done over the years, Stefan, is we've formalized it and made it as relatable as possible, so that most companies just fill out these forms, issue the documents. But because the principles of natural justice require these processes to be followed, if in the end you take disciplinary action, warning, suspension, or dismissal, and you do not have evidence of having met these standards, it will be a very, very easy and simple case for any representative, unions, lawyers, whatever, to take and go to the industrial court, and they will win.
They will win.
They will win.
No if, ands, buts,
no
or
if or
maybes.
but on the technicality of the employer failing the process. So, Ricky, to answer your question directly, there is a limit to how much reminders I should be. Letters of advice. Those are not considered to be disciplinary in nature. It's exactly what it says, advice. So I give you advice that you're going in the wrong direction, and this is the correct process. I'm reminding you. Once is a mistake, twice is a habit, the third time is a pattern. So now, in my opinion, you as the employer need to set a standard of how far you will go, and this is what you measure it against, the impact of the issue on your business. So something like an incident where $5,000 go missing, the impact on your business is significant. $5,000 is not a little sum of money. So you can't say, well, I'm going to do a letter of advice because the process says that you must do step one. That has been a preposterous thinking for some time now that has been perpetrated in my opinion, people who want to take a lazy approach to the process, the reformative process. $5 go missing, I would understand. You say, well, this could be a mistake, high probability. Hey, please be attentive on the job. $5,000 go missing. The probability of that being a mistake is very slim.
It's very slim.
Something went critically wrong. Let us do an investigation.
Right.
That's the thinking. Whatever the issue is, you quantify it and you apply it in a way as to how does it impact on the business? How serious is this? What are the risks?
All right. Morning. Hello?
Morning, morning.
Yeah, morning. Go ahead.
Yeah, in employment, your contractual arrangement has rules and regulations. It is also governed by the International Labour Organization. And with the rules of natural justice, in terms of a catcher, if money is missing, would it be fair for me to remove them from the position first in order for me to conduct an investigation to ascertain as to whether or not they are responsible for what has happened? And then is natural justice also on both sides of the fence, both with the employer and the employee? I'll listen off it.
All right.
Thank you, caller. That is a very salient point that the caller has made in terms of him asking that question. So there has been a wanton abuse of the system of leave pending the outcome of an investigation process in Trinidad and Tobago. And because of the fact that it has been abused a lot, the industrial court over the years has used its jurisdiction to provide all parties involved with some measure of guidance and clarity. And in the first instance, if you are removing a person from their job position and function for the purposes of investigation, the person must be notified in writing of the investigation commencing, notified that the leave is intended to facilitate the investigation, and that notification should not have in any way any implied or any implied language of disciplinary action. So sometimes people say this thing, you are suspended pending the outcome. And what they don't understand is that it could be easily manipulated, the argument, that term could be easily manipulated to be argued that you took disciplinary action before the actual investigation was completed. So people over the years have understood that if you're giving somebody leave, they call it administrative leave, they just call it management approval of leave pending the outcome. So you try to steer away from any connotations that imply disciplinary action, right? And the other side of it is that there must be a reasonable timeline. So you can't have somebody on suspension or leave for 2 years. I use the word suspension there. I just remember the public sector tends to use that word a lot, right? But I am not an expert in regards to the public sector.
Because the public sector is quite different because, like we were talking about this before the show, like with a police officer, if a police officer is found wanting, they can't fire him, but they could suspend the officer, but sometimes they suspend them with pay or half pay or some kind of thing like that. So is that really disciplinary action?
Well, I have a personal opinion on that as a professional, and in my mind, if you have adjusted my salary by 50% and you have not found me guilty as yet, you have already taken disciplinary action against me because now I do not have access to my salary, and pay is property in accordance to accordance to law, right? Or legal precedents. So the point is that notice, to answer your question, caller, an employer is within their right to send a person off on leave pending the outcome of an investigation, but the employer must clarify in writing that the leave is intended for a particular investigative process regarding a particular incident, that the leave is not punitive, not of a disciplinary nature, and there must be a reasonable timeline. So you're investigating a cashier, and in terms of your process in your company where $5,000 went missing, and then you take a month. That's your company, your process, your systems. And then that could happen.
Right.
It could happen. I have seen situations where the bank is involved and they have to go through a long process. But you must clarify that. We're going to take a week or we're going to take 2 weeks. And then in that process, please be advised that we've reached this stage of the investigation and this is where our hindrance is, right? Because in closing, because I know we're running out of time, I will say this, Trinidad and Tobago. There is also a measure in industrial relations, there's also a quantified measure of implied punitive action when a person is prevented from fulfilling their duties but receiving pay. And there's precedent set on this where the court has ruled that although the person was on leave with pay, the fact that they were denied of the opportunity to fulfill their duties and execute their professional skills, they were in fact treated in a punitive manner. The length of time that they were out on leave and the length of time that they were denied from being in the workplace. It was found to be discriminatory and a couple other things. There's a very old judgment. I think it was
Okay.
Carney, if I'm not mistaken.
All
I'll
right.
find that judgment for you. It'll be interesting. But the point is that you could create a situation where even the leave, where you did not state any type of intention for disciplinary action, but because of the length of time and because of the manner that the person has been treated with being off the job, for the issue that was raised, the court found that the employer had in fact breached the person's rights.
all right.
Yeah. So we'll continue this next week.
All right, so we're out of time, but we want to thank Mr. Narinesingh for coming in. We're 10 minutes away from the hour of 8 o'clock. We're going to take the final break. When we come back from that break, we will wrap things up with the birthdays and anniversaries and so on and so forth. Don't go anywhere. Breaking On continues.